please.
Yeah, go ahead. Share screen, middle. There you go. Click this. Click here.
All right, Bobby, we're halfway there.
Alicia, I think I'm better with wood than I am with technology.
That's okay.
No.
I'm probably better with this than with wood.
Click. Yeah.
So you're almost there. You're doing great.
Play.
I think now, Bobby, if you click on your slides, your actual like slideshow, it'll pull up.
You.
There you go. Nice job.
You. Yeah. Now full screen.
Oh my gosh. Okay, are we there, Alicia?
Yeah.
There. This is just a good reminder that we would be nowhere without our people to support us. Take it away, Bobby.
Okay, so are you seeing a picture of the boat shop sign and you're not
Yes.
seeing me?
Yep.
We're seeing both.
We see you both. It's the wonders of modern technology.
Okay, Mike, nice to hear your voice. Okay, well, let's begin. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome you all. What a joy to see all your angelic faces out there. It's like old home week, seeing so many wonderful friends. So thank you very, very much for coming and for sharing in this little journey down memory lane at the Carpenter's Boat Shop. 45 years, I can't quite believe it. But before I begin, let me just simply say to you all a word of deep thanks to Alicia. Alicia has been with us, as I say, over 3 years now, and she has just done an outstanding job kind of guiding and taking the helm of the Carpenter's Boat Shop and bringing and preserving always the traditions of the past, but making such wonderful new innovations and all different kinds of extra activities which have renewed and brought a wonderful kind of excellence to the program. This speaker series is but one of the many changes, not changes, but initiatives she started. Of course, the Artist in Residence program, expedition sailing. So Alicia has just added so much to the boat shop, which we're deeply, deeply grateful. So Alicia, many, many thanks to you for your excellence as a new director to us. So let's begin our journey. Let's start our journey down memory lane with 45 years of boat shop history. So here we go. So for all intents and purposes, the boat shop begins formally in June of 1979. But in all reality, it actually begins at least 6 years before that. You see, the seeds for what we were doing and the roots for what became the boat shop start in different places. And the first one in 1973 starts here on this very wonderful island. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with Manhegan Island. Again, it's a wonderful place, 75 people year round. 14 children when we were there, 13 fishermen, and a summer population of about 750 people, of which most, or at least 200, are artists. So here's one of the great artists from Manhegan Island, N.C. Wyeth, who's painting that beautiful picture of Manhegan there with a Manhegan fisherman, painted again in 1938. So in 1973, Ruth and I are hired by the people of Manhegan Island to become the ministers of the little community church. I love that picture with all the old wooden traps. And here's another wonderful picture there. It's called Skiffs at Church. And we actually built that skiff that's now going to church there. But again, in 73, in August, we begin our ministry there on the island. And we begin as the teachers of the one-room schoolhouse. So we had 14 children, ages kindergarten to 8th grade, and here they are around the schoolhouse, but boom, there they are at the library for our annual school photo. So the guy in the far right there with a mustache and rather long hair is actually the person who is talking to you now. And indeed, there are our wonderful children. And I'm going to surprise you because there they are from ages 5 to 15. And boom, there they are now, 55 to 65 years of age. Can you believe it? We had last year the 50th reunion of all the school children on the island. And so there they all are. Not all of them, 11 were there. Sadly, one had died. And but there they all are, and they're doing all kinds of wonderful things. They're very maritime inclined, of course. There are 3 boat captains who are there, and there's one professor of at Maine Maritime Academy, but they're just a dear and wonderful group, and we had the best reunion ever. So life on the island when we were there was a rather interesting, rugged kind of event. We we were always a little chilly because the house we lived in, right next to the lighthouse, had no insulation. Of course, there was no electricity, no running water, but we were heated by that little, or that wood, not wood stove, it was a kerosene stove. So poor Ruth always would come home from about mid-October to mid-March, and the first thing she would do is grab that quilt, put a stocking cap on, put her feet in the oven, and she would be warm for the evening. So as cold and as chilly as we were out on the island, we were truly warmed by the wonderful community, the sense of friendship, and the whole sense of support that we received from the people out there. Again, the beginning of seeds for what would become the boat shop. We then moved to another island, of course, Loud's Island, or Muscongas Island, the old name for the island, which the people have selected to call it now. But indeed, in 1975, we bought an old farm there. Now, when we were on Manhigan Island, we used to go to Loud's Island as the summer ministers there, and that's how we got to know the people on the island. But in 1975, we actually purchased this old farm. It was owned by a woman from Scotland, actually. Her name was Hilda Libby. Hilda was born and raised in Scotland, and then eventually married a lobsterman from New Harbor. And during that time with him, she bought this old farm on the island and kind of fixed it up, and we met Hilda Libby. Now, sadly, she was divorced from this lobster fisherman in New Harbor and chose to go back to Scotland. She knew we had come from Scotland, and when we learned that she might be selling the actual house, we went to her and asked if she would ever consider selling it to us. And she, believe it or not, said she would be thrilled to do it, and that she would give it to us for the price that she paid for it 8 years before. A very large amount of $23,000 for 5 acres of land and this old farm on Loud's Island. But that time on Loud's Island were kind of what I call the learning lessons of life. We just loved it out there. We did all kinds of things that would eventually become a part of the boat shop, splitting of wood, rebuilding the house to make it winterized. We always had a garden. This is the beginning of a garden. It was about 4 times that size. It was a vegetable garden. We also built lobster traps, 75 lobster traps, and went, again, lobster fishing in this dory around the island. And of course, it was there that I learned to build boats. I learned from a summer resident by the name of Edward Saylor. And on the island, I built this peapod. I built another peapod, which we sold, and also a skiff. But it was this peapod that we would row back and forth from the island into Round Pond Harbor. And it was there every weekend that we would serve a little church in Sheepscot, Maine. So again, this whole life was just an important formative stage of the beginnings of the boat shop. In 1977, while we were still on the island, the minister of the New Harbor Methodist Church here and the Round Pond Methodist Church there, his name was Dr. John Wesley McKelvey, and John and I became very, very close friends. And at one point in 1977, he turned to me and he said, "You know, I'm not doing so well. But if anything happens to me, I would like you to take over these churches here in New Harbor and Round Pond." I said, "John, I don't know what to say. I mean, I just don't want anything to happen to you." 1 month later, John died. We were soon contacted by the bishop of these churches, the bishop of the Methodist churches, and he said to me, you know, John Wesley McKelvey asked me if you would take over the churches. I really don't want you because you're not a Methodist, but I can't refuse the request of John Wesley McKelvey. He was such an important person. So would you be willing to be the interim minister of these churches? I was reluctant to take him also. I really didn't want to do it, but I did want to really honor John in that kind of way and do what he had requested. And so I said yes to being the interim minister. Well, it really proved to be one of the best decisions we ever made because we were there not for a year or even 6 months. We were there for 2.5 years. And during that time, we just fell in love with New Harbor and Round Pond. We loved the people. They were so supportive. And we realized that this would be the place. This would be the place that we would like to start our life dream of starting the Carpenter's Boat Shop. And so in 1979, actually in 1978, we purchased this old chicken farm from one of my parishioners, Ed Penniman and Dot Penniman, and we bought that actual farm. Now, before I go any further, I want to just simply say to you all that one cannot begin a school, a program, a ministry, an organization like the Carpenter's Boat Shop without a lot of help. And we were very fortunate to receive a lot of help over the years. But the first help really came in this venue right here, because the day that we retired, or not retired, but stepped down from the ministry of the New Harbor churches and Round Pond churches, the people of the churches and the people of the community gave us a pounding party. Now, I'm sure I shared this with a number of you before, but a pounding party, of course, is an old New England tradition. And what it does is if there's a new family in a community, you give them a pound of something to get them settled away. And indeed, the people at this pounding party, and there were over 300 people there, they did just that. They gave us a pound of many things. They gave us flour, sugar, butter, but they also gave us pounds and pounds of machinery like table saws, band saws, and planers. They gave us hand tools I had a few hand tools, but all the hand tools we would need to begin the program. They gave us blankets and furniture. It was the people of this community who really started us all off with their generosity and their support in that kind of way. There were other enormously kind helpers, however, and here are two of them. This is Hal and Holly Lockhart. Hal was a patent attorney for AT&T living in a place called Basking Ridge, New Jersey. This is our connection to Basking Ridge, Hal and Holly. And indeed, they introduced us to the Presbyterian Church there, and of course, the youth group, which has been coming ever since 1985. But in the event, about 3 years into the program, Hal came to me and he said to me, you know, you're going to have difficult times financially from time to time. I just want you to make a promise to me. And that is, if you ever get into any kind of debt, do not go to any bank. You come to me, and I will loan the money that you need free of any interest, and you can pay it back whenever you're able. Well, again, it just makes me always kind of weep by the kindness and the generosity of a person like Hal and Holly in doing that. But it was that kind of assurance, it was that kind of underpinning that really enabled us to really go on with the financial difficulties we were always having at the boat shop. Fortunately, my favorite color is always red, and indeed, probably for the 34 years I led the boat shop, we were never out of the red, but we were paying our bills on a regular basis because of dear people like Hal and Holly. But then there's another such important person in the tradition of the boat shop, and this is Edward Saylor. So there's Edward Saylor at the oars and his dear friend kind of giving him a virtual hug there. But of course, it was Edward who was my mentor. It was he who taught me wooden boat building, how to loft and draft, and how to use all tools that way. And it was he who really got me started. So, as many of you know, I lost my parents when I was in high school. But it was Edward who became my spiritual father. And when he died, 7 years after we began the boat shop, I built him a coffin and we buried Edward in a small little Norwegian cemetery down in Dedham, Massachusetts. He has died and long gone, but he is always, always with me in my heart every day. So we begin the boat shop. We begin the boat shop, and we start again in June of 1979. We had bought this old chicken farm from Ed Penniman. The chickens weren't there, but the remnants, certainly of all the chickens, was there. And there was at least 3 inches of solid manure on every single floor. So the beginning days, of course, was shoveling it all out. We had the best gardens you can imagine with all that chicken manure, but we transformed the whole shop. And this is how it looked about a year after we really began. We had converted all the chicken coops and the grain bins of the chickens into horses and benches and stands. And that's how it looked, as I say, about a year, maybe a year and a half after we began. But it was a wonderful facility for building all different kinds of boats and working together in many different ways. About 2 years after we began, actually about a year and a half after we began, we realized that we needed to add on and build a dormitory. So a very dear friend of mine, a man named Peter Knaus, who was the financial director at the Maine Maritime Museum, then it was called the Bath Marine Maritime Museum. But Peter was a good friend, and Peter said, look, I can help you. Well, let's raise some money. And he began kind of a mini campaign and raised a number of money, and we were able to afford all the lumber that way. And indeed, we built the dormitory. So we did it ourselves. We started in about, I think, probably about mid-September, again, 1980, 81. And by December, mid-December, there it is all kind of framed in, and boom, there it was. Now, it was I, a few helpers, and all the apprentices who built that in that 3-month period. And the wonderful thing about it was it had built-in quality control. You see, all the apprentices knew they had to live in that building, so they worked extra hard to make sure it would stand up and they could actually have their own kind of personal room. So that's the way it looked when it was finished. Then in 1984, we were given the gift of this rather unusual boat. It is a 42-foot Cullen Archer ketch. Now, it was owned by a man named Dr. Joseph Scrow, and it has a rather interesting history. So Joe Scrow owned this boat. It was in bad shape, so he took it to Camden, Maine, to have it totally refurbished and renewed. The boatyard there in Camden took the job on. It took them about, I think, 6 months, 7 months to totally renovate and restore this particular vessel, again, this Cullen Archer ketch. When it was finished, and I think the cost was about $500,000, when it was finished, it went down the ways and hit the water and then didn't stop there. It went right down. It sank in Camden Harbor. Well, Joe Scrow was a little sad and annoyed that his boat had just sunk right in front of him. And he then applied and actually, I think he sued the owner of the boat shop. The owner of the boat shop had a very wealthy father, a multimillionaire, who quickly paid off the bill of $500,000, which left the boat kind of condemned and unusable. I, to this day, do not know how it found its way to Bristol, Maine, but one day in 1984, I was driving by Buzz Benner's driveway. Buzz Benner lives right opposite the Bristol area library. And in his parking lot was this boat. Well, I'm kind of a nosy guy, and I always love to see any kinds of boats, so I quickly stopped and went aboard and looked it all over and was amazed by the vessel. And literally, as I was looking at this boat, a Cadillac drives up. Out comes this rather interesting looking man. We get to talking, and he introduces himself as Joe Scrow. I said, "Oh, you're the owner of this boat." He said, "Well, I was. It's just kind of floating around, and we're not sure what to do with it." He said, "What do you do?" Well, I told him about the boat shop and everything. He literally said this to me: "Do you want it?" I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to have it. That'd be wonderful. He said, what would you use it for? I said, I would use it as a guest house. We always have so many people coming through the boat, not least of which are all the apprentices and sometimes their parents, but we always have people who need a place to stay and everything. I would use it as a boathouse and a guest house. He said, the boat is yours. I couldn't believe it. 1 week later, we had it where it is right now, which is where the restoration shop is. And it did. It served as, it had 8 staterooms. It was amazing. So we used it for housing, and it worked well for about 3 years. But at the end of the 3 years, the decks began to leak. It wasn't so comfortable sleeping with a leaky boat there dropping on you. And we weren't sure what to do with it. And literally at that time, a man named William arrived. William said to me, what are you using that boat for? I said, it was a guest house, but it's not really working out so well. It's leaking pretty badly. He said, oh, would you be willing to sell it? I said, yeah, sure, I'd be glad to sell it. He said, what would you want to sell it for? I said, well, not much, because all I really want is another guest house. I'd like to have a barn chapel and a place for people to stay, and a meeting house for people to gather. And I think that we would probably need maybe about $5,000 or $6,000 to afford the wood, because we really want to build it ourselves. He said, okay, I'd like to pay you, and I'll give you $7,000. He took out a checkbook, gave me $7,000. And as he did, I said, wait a minute, what are you going to use this boat for? He said, I was one of the people who restored that boat. There was a whole team of us. And I know we obviously made some mistakes, but they're not serious mistakes. And I know that boat can sail again. And I'd like to redeem our reputations in some way to get that boat going. I said, the boat's all yours. A year and a half later, that boat was sailing, and the William now sails between Maine and Florida every single year. So I was thrilled to be able to help out, to help individuals redeem their reputations. And with the money, we began to build the barn chapel. So here we are cutting out the frame for it. There's Basking Ridge Youth Group, again, who've been coming for so long. But the barn was probably, we put it up around 1989, somewhere in that time frame. So here we're pushing up all the beams and the posts and the bench, we call it. If you notice in the background, there's Jim Austin there. Most of you know Jim, I'm sure. It was Jim who designed the whole building, and he kind of coordinated all the putting together of it. So it was a wonderful project. And indeed, there goes the deck across to it, and there are the rafters going up, and boom, it's all done. So it's obviously been a wonderful kind of edifice, and it's helped us in so many different ways. And there's one of the early board meetings that took place soon after it was built. Now, here's an interesting building. Probably most of you don't remember it looking like that, but that is a Crocker cutter, a 32-foot Crocker cutter that we were asked to do some repairs on. We built this structure over it, covered it on in plastic and, again, tarpaulins. And after it went out, after about a year or so, we said to ourselves, you know, this is a pretty good little shed and restoration shop. Why don't we not take down the studded frame? Let's just add to it. So boom, there we go. We added sheathing and plastic windows, and it became a wonderful 3-season restoration shop. But we thought, it really needs a little more. So what we should do is add a stove and make it into a more permanent building. And that's the way it looked, again, around, I guess, 93 or 4, something like that. And we used it well, but it was a little long and narrow. We couldn't get any machinery into it. So we decided, let's push this thing out. So boom, there we go. We pushed it out that way. That added a lot, and it was wonderful. But still, we had a problem. That was when we repaired all these different boats. Often in the wintertime, we'd put them outside and cover them with tarps, but inevitably the tarps would blow off, and we'd have to repaint them by the time the customer came along to build it. So we said, let's build a barn too. So boom, there we go. we build the barn, and that has helped enormously. We love that boat barn, and that's the complex for restoration. And it's just a wonderful complex for all the restoration work we do. Okay, we're now up to 1999. A man named Bobby Crook who lived in there. That's Crooked Farm, of course. So Bobby Crook comes across to the boat shop and says to me, "I'd like to sell you my farm." I said, "Bobby, I'd like to buy your farm." He said, "No, I really want to sell you my farm and I'll give it to you for as low as I can." I said, "It must be about $1 because that's all I have." He said, "No, no, no, you've got a board of directors. You ask them whether they would like to buy my farm." Well, literally about 2 weeks later, we had one of our board of directors meetings. And I posed the question, do we want to buy Bobby Crook's Crooked Farm? Because he's wanting to offer it to us for as low as he can afford, $250,000. Well, at the meeting, it was the unanimous decision. This is not a question of whether we buy it. It's a question of how do we buy it. And once again, Peter Knaus, who was no longer at the Maine Maritime Museum, but was now the head of the Damariscotta River Association, Peter Knaus said, "This is so easy. It's amazing. We can do it very easily. What we'll do is we'll form a little triumvirate of the Carpenter's Boat Shop, Damariscotta River Association, and the Pemaquid Watershed Association, and we'll buy it together. The two environmental groups will take all the land, which was 150 acres of land and 1.5 miles of frontage on the Pemaquid River and part of Boyd's Pond." So indeed, we ended up doing that. They paid for 2/3 of the farm cost of $250,000. The boat shop paid for 1/3, getting all the buildings and 10 acres of land. So it was a wonderful marriage made in heaven, and it is still working to this day. Wonderful land tract. Now, indeed, we had to, the farmhouse, again, looks very nice there, but actually the back wall of the foundation had fallen in. The floor over here was totally in the cellar, so it was in hard shape. So we realized that we had to totally renovate or reconstruct the whole building. At that time, living with us was a person named Graham Searle. Graham was an apprentice with us for a full year. He had actually sailed from England to the boat shop, was an apprentice. By trade, he was an engineer and he did a lot of carpentry, but he wanted to learn about boat building, so he became apprentice. The next year, we asked him to stay on as an instructor. And then Graham, when we bought the place, said to me, "You know, if you'll let me stay another year, I'll direct the rebuilding of the red farmhouse with 3 or 4 apprentices at all times, and we'll totally rebuild the farmhouse." And indeed, that's what we're doing. There's Graham, of course, right there on the ridgepole there. But we totally rebuilt probably about 70% of the entire red farmhouse, replacing the foundation and placing windows and putting a whole new kind of roof on it. And of course, that's how it looked when we were finished. So things are moving along. We also had, of course, the barn, and we decided, okay, what we'll do is, since the old boat shop was condemned by OSHA back when we started, they couldn't shut us down because there was no one being paid any salaries. But nevertheless, we decided to renovate the barn and to turn it into our new official boat shop. So here's Basking Ridge Youth Group cleaning out all the hay, probably about 100 years old, and all that is in the barn. And we began to take it down. I had consulted with a man named John Libby from Libby Post and Beam Company there in Freeport. And John had come up and said, and told me what I had to do to really renovate and restore the barn. He said, "Take it all down, put in a good foundation, and then put all the posts and beams back up if they're worth it." Well, indeed, we took it all down, piece by piece. All the apprentices and I, we took the whole thing down. There we are, taking off, obviously, the sheathing of the roof, and that's what it looked like. Pretty shaky, of course. I fell through one of those purlins up there. But in any event, we numbered it, and we're going to put it up. But as it came down, I realized this is just a little too rotten for putting it So we had it on the ground there, all numbered, labeled, and written about on how to do it. And instead of putting it back up, we put a for sale sign on it. Person from Connecticut bought it for $10,000, and it's now a barn about half that size in Clinton, Connecticut. Anyway, we decided that we would rebuild. We got a grant actually from Stephen King. Stephen was a good friend of Bruce, and indeed he gave us $50,000 to put a new foundation in. We built the floor, but at the rate we did it, it was taking, we realized it would take us probably about 3 to 4 years to build a whole barn. So it was then that we had a capital campaign, and we hired the Amish to come and to frame it, of course. And here they are arriving, and they put this frame up. There they are there with all their hard hats on. And indeed, that's what they left us after 3.5 days. We then had another group of carpenters called Bevel Cove Builders. 3 carpenters, dear individuals, and they came for 8 months working with 3 apprentices at all times, and that's what they finally finished off probably about 8 or 9 months later. So it's just a wonderful shop, and that's how the entire building looks together, of course, and it has just been wonderful in so many, many ways. Then in so sorry, what happened? Stop share. Alicia,
Yep, I think just click
Should I
back
put-
on that
okay.
slide, Bobby.
the slide.
Your screen sharing.
So we're good on the screen share. I think if you, yep, you're halfway there. Well done.
It's not I.
Oh, thank
Oh,
you.
there we go. Anything that happens
Here
is
we go.
because of Phyllis.
Nice job.
Okay. So in 2011, I had announced to the board of directors that I would be stepping down in 2012. And so they decided that we really would like to have a director's house. So at the board meeting, we decided that it would be built in the parking lot. That would be nice and close, and there was a space there. So we decided we'd do it there. Literally just at that time, John and Paula Hall, Bobby Crook's son-in-law and daughter, came over, and he said to me, you know, just as my father-in-law came over and offered to sell you his barn and farm, I'm coming over and offering to sell you my house. I heard you're looking for a new director's house, and this would work beautifully. Well, he was absolutely right. And indeed, the board met, and they decided that they would purchase this particular house. We had another fundraiser, and indeed raised the money. And that has been, of course, now the wonderful director's house that Alicia and Annie stay in at the present time. But the boat shop then was in such wonderful order. Again, it was perfect for doing carpentry and for doing boat building and for paint and varnishing and everything. And indeed, it's worked out tremendously. So the boat shop year always begins, of course, with 9, 10 apprentices. And of course, many of them have no carpentry whatsoever. I would say at least 50, 60% have some kind of carpentry. But we always begin the boat shop year by building a few items to get people used to table saws and chisels and planes. The first item is usually always a toolbox of some sort. We usually turn a mallet on the lathe, and sometimes we've made shaker lap desks there for the notes that people will be actually having. So that's the first 2 weeks to kind of have orientation to woodworking. Then we move immediately into building skiffs. We usually build 1 or 2 skiffs, and whoever builds it, that's what they look like, generally speaking, when they're done. But at the end of the 2 weeks of building those skiffs, we always launch them. And then the apprentices are graded for the first and last time ever. And that is, they are graded in a pass-fail way. We launch the boats. Whoever's built them have to sit in the boat. And if it floats, they pass. If it doesn't, they don't. But at least they know where the difficulties were, because it's kind of leaking in around them wherever it is. But I want to tell you, in 45 years, everyone has passed. this is a lovely picture here, and a lovely man right there, Paul. Anyway, we'll continue on. So the boats we build are basically traditional Maine wooden craft. Here's a typical kind of dinghy that we built, the cat's paw dinghy. Here's Toby beginning to frame out a wonderful 21-foot dory. That's the way it looked when it was kind of under construction. And boom, that's the way it looked when it was finished. So that's codfish. That's a 21-foot dory. And this gentleman right there is Dick Stickney. And it was Dick Stickney who ordered codfish. He was from Gloucester, Massachusetts. He worked for some company called Dow Jones, and he retired to New Harbor. And Dick came to me and said he wanted this particular dory. It reminded him of his days in Gloucester. And so we built it for him. And it took about 7 months or so to build it. And every single day, Dick would come to the boat shop and he would bring chocolate eclairs and donuts for the apprentices. He just was so happy to see the boat under construction. He'd only stay about 5-10 minutes at the longest and then leave. He didn't want to interrupt the construction. But on the day we were to launch the boat, Dick came to me and he said to me, you know, this is one of the saddest days of my life. I said, Dick, how could it be one of the saddest days of your life? You're now going to be launching this boat this afternoon. He said, no, it's the saddest day of my life. You see, now I have no excuse to come to the boat shop and be with the apprentices and watch them work. I said, Dick, you're wrong. No, because today you have just been appointed to be a member of the board of directors of the boat shop. And indeed, he did become a member of the board of directors for about 5 years. And then sadly, Dick died of a massive heart attack. And his dear wife, Claire, came to me soon thereafter. And she said to me, you know, Dick loved the boat shop so much and all the apprentices. And he made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, that codfish was to go back to the apprentices of the Carpenter's boat shop to just simply say thank you for the joy that they brought into his life. So that's the story of codfish. And now we've been using codfish for over 30 years, and it's still just a wonderful, able boat for so many different purposes. Here's Wally building a typical kind of dinghy right there downstairs in a building that we no longer have, actually. But nevertheless, that's the boat that was a cat's paw dinghy there. And there's codfish with its little Dodger on as well. Here are 6 little nutshell prams that we built for a camp on Lake Copasaconte, Pilgrim Lodge. And we built these over 40 years ago, and they're still doing beautifully. Actually, we built 2 of these. Here are 2 dories we built for this particular organization, Hog Island Audubon Camp. It's a national Audubon camp where they hold all the different courses there on flora and fauna and ornithology. But they use the dories, of course, to get their students onto the various different islands, Matinicus Rock or Eastern Egg Rock, but they use the dories all the time. But I can see they don't bail them very regularly. Anyways, this was a wonderful boat that we built. A dear man by the name of Dr. Alfred Ring came to me one day around probably about 1985, and he gave me this picture. It's, of course, Winslow Homer's picture of breezing up. And Dr. Ring, Alfred, said to me, you know, ever since I was the age of those little boys in that boat, I've wanted that boat. Now I'm the age of the old man, and I've got to have it before I die. Will you build it for me? I said, sure, we'd be glad to do that. So indeed, we took on the job of trying to build Breezing Up. I sent down to Mystic Seaport and asked them, what would Winslow Homer have seen around the 1890s when this picture was painted? What would he have seen around Gloucester, Massachusetts that would have been like Breezing Up? They sent me a plan for a boat that seemed about right. And indeed, we started it, framed it and everything, and boom, there it is. Again, that we built that probably about 1986 or so. Anyway, there it is at this point. Here's a double-ended dory that's now out on Manhegan Island. Here's a Matinicus Island peapod that a person over in Harpswell used for 10 years to lobster out of. This is the apprentice who built it. We always have built a number of Rangeley Lake boats. There are various variations of the Rangeley Lake boat, but we built, as I say, at least 5 or 6 of them. Here's an Adirondack guide boat that we sent to California. There's Tom Price. Tom was one of the speakers of the speaker series. It was he who was the, again, apprentice to the Venetian gondola builder. But Tom was with us, a wonderful apprentice. Here's a boat that he actually built. When he finished with the boat shop, went to Berea College. He won that at that place, a Thomas J. Watson Foundation Fellowship. And that's how he became an apprentice to the gondola builder in Venice. Actually, Tom now is the lead carpenter, the master builder at the but the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. So he's one of the directors and the master builder down there at the present time. Here's Malcolm working on frames for a Haven 12 and a half. And here it is when it was launched. There's Jim actually also right there in the boat, because Jim oversaw the entire construction of that boat. Here's a boat we just finished about 1.5 years ago. It's actually a carbon copy of the Peapod I built on Musconga's Louds Island. And we built it for the man right here in the blue shirt. His name is Don Plath. And dear Don ordered it, but Don is the one of the coaches at Cornell University, a rowing coach there. And that's why we put in this special rowing machine. But it was a fun project to do with the apprentices and with all the FOBs, the Friends of the Boat Shop. And then often in the spring, we have a little regatta and we launch all the different boats. And I think there's around 1990, about 2002, somewhere in that time. But here are the classic types of boats. And of course, there's Codfish as well, Round Pond Harbor. So we obviously build a lot of new boats, but also we repair a lot of boats. I would say over the years, we probably have averaged about $2 an hour for new construction and probably about $4 for restoration. So it's wonderful to be able to repair boats, but it's also a little bit better for the coffers. So in any event, we do any kind of boats that seem to come in. Here's a 1938 Old Town canoe that we put a number of ribs in and recanvas the whole thing. Here's an old Danish crown sloop. This is the way it came in, and boom, that's the way it left. Here's a Booth Harbor 1. Darren Carlucci, of course, for years and years, always was the restoration person in, again, the restoration shop. Here's, again, Booth Bay Harbor 1. I think he replaced many of the ribs, a number of the planks. So here it is under construction, and there she goes, down into Round Pond Harbor, Rosebud right there. This was a wonderful boat we repaired back in the early 90s. It was the Cape Cod Knockabout, 18-foot Cape Cod Knockabout. It was brought to me by an Episcopal priest. Let him remain anonymous. We'll call him Jerry. But anyway, Jerry brought this and said, will you repair this? It's my family boat. It's been in my family for over 60 years. Can you totally rebuild it? I said, sure. Yeah, I would love to do that. So we did. It took us a number of months. And when it was done, Jerry came over from New Hampshire where he lived. And for some reason, he had forgotten his checkbook. Anyway, I gave him the bill. It was about $5,000. And anyways, he took it away and said he would get a check to me immediately. 3 weeks later, a check did arrive. And it was for not $5,000, but for $4,500. So I was kind of perplexed about this, and I quickly zipped him a note and said, Jerry, the boat was $5,000. So you're in arrears of $500. If you could pay, we'd be very, very grateful. Nothing showed up. 6 months went by. I sent him a note. Jerry, you still owe $500. No payment. 3 years went by with me always reminding Jerry. But after 3 years, a letter came from Jerry. And in the letter was a check for not $500, but $600. And in it was a little note that said, Dear Bob, I'm giving you this check that I certainly owed you, but I'm giving it to you because God told me that I had to pay my bill to you. And God told me in a rather dramatic way that I was to pay my bill. You see, my boat was on Lake Winnipesaukee at a marina with about 100 other boats. And one night there was a lightning storm, and my boat was the only boat hit by that lightning. It hit the mast, it came down the mast, blew 2 holes through the chain plates, and sank my boat right in place. And I knew that that was God telling me that I should pay my bill. So indeed, I got a check for not $500, but $600. And that's what he said to me. I'm adding $100 to simply say, would you be willing to repair my boat again? And I said, sure, Jerry, of course we'd repair it again. And so we did. We totally rebuilt. And it was a wonderful decision because Jerry actually came to the boat shop as a sabbatical minister, and we had the best time with him. But the best gift that Jerry gave us was that his daughter, his dear daughter Claire, came and was an apprentice at the boat shop also. And she's now a boat builder down in southern Maine. So we've done a lot of other types of boats. Here's Dick Kennedy's boats, 26-foot. Well, Dick came and said, would you ever be willing to repair my 26-foot war canoes? I said, Dick, no way. I'm not going to repair any war canoe. But if you're willing to call them peace canoes, I'd be thrilled to be able to repair them. And Dick said, of course they're peace canoes. Please, would you repair them? So he did. And those 26-foot peace canoes are still at Camp Kiev, holding, I think, about 12 people in them at once. And here's a wonderful restoration job we did a couple of years ago. Of course, is that iconic dory, over 100 years old. And we totally rebuilt it about 2 years ago, and it's sitting there right by the lighthouse to this day. So the apprentices, of course, come from all different places. They're from all different backgrounds and situations. But these apprentices are as typical as any. This is probably the class of 1983. Of course, the early days, they were more males than females, but it got balanced out pretty quickly. But in any event, people often ask, what are the apprentices? What do they do after they leave? Well, again, I'll kind of go through these individuals of what they have done. Cliff here, after he left the boat shop, he went to Middlebury College and then went on for a master's and PhD degree at the University of North Carolina, and he's working now in North Carolina. Again, Jeff here sadly died in a very bad car accident about 2 years after he left the boat shop. Josh here is a cabinet maker now down in Essex, Connecticut. Peter is an architect, builds boats on the side, but he's an architect in Geneva, Switzerland. Bob teaches Chinese on Long Island at a high school there. Al is a paralegal from Oklahoma. And Jeffrey there with the cocked head is now in Chicago, and he builds instruments, violins and cello. So that's as typical of many different apprentices as we have. Here's the class of 2000. And I might mention that this lady right here, Abby Rowe, is now the head of our board of directors of the boat shop. So here's Robert from Scotland. Here's Graham. There's Graham right there who rebuilt the whole building. Again, here's Andrew. He studied to be a rabbi, and he's now living in Israel. So they are all over the place. So here's the class of, I guess, probably about 2003. Here we are up to 2006. Sadly, here's Ruth, and she died about 2 months later after this picture was taken. And indeed, we move on. Here's the class of probably about 2018, somewhere in that time frame. Here's 2010, and boom, 2012, I retire, and Kim Orr takes the reins at that particular point. And Kim serves for about 7 years as the director of the boat shop. And then she steps down about 2000 and I guess 19, 18, somewhere in there. Not a very good picture, but here's Matt Shedd, who was the interim director for about 8 or 9 months. And at that point, they selected Sonia Torinsky to come in and to lead the boat shop. Sonia did an excellent job, but sadly, 2019 COVID-19 strikes. The apprentices are asked to go home. Sonia kind of is wondering what really am I doing here. And she then hands in her resignation to go back to the Blue Hill area and to resume the job she had before this. So that put our very beloved Sarah Hyland, who was willing to take the reins and who became the interim director. She was asked if she wanted to be the director, but she said no, she really preferred to be an instructor at the boat shop. And so another search committee was formed, and here's our new beloved director here, Alicia Witham. And Alicia took over in 2021 too, in that way. And she has, as I mentioned, done a wonderful job. And here is a very foggy picture, but this picture is of all the wonderful apprentices we've had this year. They've done an outstanding job. And sadly, they're going to be leaving us in about a month's time, around Thanksgiving time. But they are just a special group of people and are headed to all different kinds of different situations. So blessings on them all. So the boat shop, of course, has all these individuals who we teach how to build boats, but they learn so much more than just boat building. We always teach them how to use the boats that they build. And here's Jeffrey learning Peapod to row the Peapod. Here we are learning how to paddle canoes, how to cast off from a mooring and go sailing. Here's our little beetle cat named Betsy that we sailed for years and years. Here's an institution himself there at the boat shop. There's Bill Grogan, who's been a gardener for us forever, at least 25 years. And Bill has always kind of kept the gardens going and showing people how to do the garden. Always we celebrate the rites of spring as well as the rites of fall, and usually fill about 2 or 3 canoes worth of apples and squeeze from. This was our very first little cider press. And here's our more modern one. It was built, at least the machinery in it was built in 1898, and we built a special frame for it. But we've squeezed anywhere from 50 to 100 gallons of cider and drink it throughout the whole year. For about 20 years, we had this sawmill also. It too was a gift of a very kind individual, and we sawed out a lot of our boat shop lumber and boards for all kinds of purposes. Always one of the great traditions, of course, are the blueberry muffins, a Ruth's recipe that way. And still we celebrate tea break at 10 o'clock every single weekday. And of course, all the apprentices are taught how to cook and do have to do the cooking for all the meals that we serve. This is one of the great rites of winter, and indeed pond hockey has been played for at least 30 years. We have always set up a hockey rink down on the ice pond on Route 32, and they've brought an awful lot of enjoyment. It's a good way to get the dust out of your lungs and have a good time. Also, we are always cutting wood. We have traditionally cut anywhere from 15 to 20 cord of wood, using about 15 for the 13 wood stoves we have. But also, of course, we give away about 5 cord to neighbors in need. I often, not facetiously, but have often said we are socialists by day and capitalists by night. Inasmuch as all the work that apprentices do, of course, go to the general coffers of the boat shop, all the boats we build during the daytime. But at night, they can work themselves in the boat shop and make personal money to sustain themselves at the boat shop. And here's Rob Baumüller building an actual skiff, and he sold it and made a lot of money to last him through the year. And here's Todd Garth. Todd is on our board of directors right now, but Todd bought an old canoe out of a barn. He totally re-canvassed it and put in ribs and everything. And I think Todd made about $800 on that one. Also, social service projects. We're always doing social service projects and helpful projects around the community. And I think we have helped out on Manhegan Island painting the church. I think we've painted our way around the church, painting one side at a time. And I think we've painted our way 2 times around the Manhegan Island Church. It's always a lot of fun. Here was a wonderful project we did for a person over in Wiscasset. Sadly, he was a carpenter and went blind. And he still wanted to carpenter, though. So we helped build this special little shed. And this individual ended up building pine furniture in this little woodworking shed that we built. And he did it totally blind using band saws and table saws. He was just a remarkable person. He even helped us shingle the roof. Also, we always take trips. We usually try to take a trip about once a month to different boat builders or carpenters in the area. But this was always a very special trip. I think we went here about 3 or 4 times to Bill Copperthwaite. For those of you who know, Bill, of course, the yurt builder. He actually taught at the Harvard School of Education. But Bill is just a unique man. He's kind of the yurt man. He's built yurts probably all around the world. But this is his own personal yurt. And we went there, obviously, in the wintertime. We stayed in the guest yurt, and I think the temperature that night was about 20 below zero. So I think the people are smiling because the sun has finally come out. In any event, Bill was a very special person, and it was always a joy to kind of travel there. For at least 25, 30 years, we raised different animals, usually pigs, and we always raised them for the Heifer Project, which is always for food relief and food insecurity. Also, we always have had chickens, of course, as well. And there's our wonderful boat shop dog. That's Magnus, who was with us for 10 years. And of course, we always have different summer classes, now winter classes in various different things from boat building to shaker furniture building. Here's women's woodworking. Here is, again, children's woodworking in the summertime. And I might mention that this gentleman and this gentleman, this one just graduated from Colby College, and this lovely man here just graduated from the University of Michigan. So we have all different kinds of classes going on. But probably one of the most important things for me in the boat shop year are the 3-day solos. We always ask all the apprentices to go on a 3-day solo in the fall and a 3-day solo in the spring in order to kind of ponder and to contemplate life and what the individuals will be doing in life, where they'll be doing it, how they'll be doing it, with whom they'll be doing it. But it's a wonderful chance for them to reflect on life and the meaning, the purpose, and what makes life worth living, and what will bring truly a life of meaning, purpose, and deep peace. So the boat shop continues. It continues on a regular basis, and it continues now for 45 years. But it has always been the hope and the dream and the vision of all of us that whoever comes to the boat shop, no matter who they are, whether they are apprentices or whether they're visitors or whether they are guests, it is our hope and prayer that all who come to the boat shop will learn to live without fear, that they will learn to love without reserve, and that they will learn to willingly work for the common good of all, to live without fear, to love without reserve, and to willingly work for the common good of all. That is the hope and the vision and the prayer that we always have for this generation and for generations to come in the life of the boat shop. So thanks so much. Thank you for letting me share all of these different thoughts about our little spiritual journey down memory lane. So again, Alicia, I'm not sure how I turn it over to you and back, but here we are.
Bobby, I think if you stop sharing your screen and then we'll open it up to questions. Folks have 2 options for questions. You can either just unmute yourself and ask Bobby, or if you feel more inclined, you can put it in the chat box and I'd be happy to read it to Bobby. But this is a great opportunity for you all to ask away.
I can see we're way beyond our time already. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's totally fine. Folks have any questions for Bobby about his 45-year journey?
Hi, Bob. This is Phil Devenish here in Hancock.
Oh, Phil, how are you? My God.
Fine. I just wanted to tell you that just last week I had occasion to tell 2 young UCC ministers about the Dory trip for Pilgrim Lodge and the outdoor ministries that I inherited from John McDuffie, I think it was, and passed on to to Rob McCall. So that was another connection.
Oh, that's fantastic. Phil, lovely to see you.
Great to see you, Bob.
Bob, Stu Gillespie here. Hi. Bob,
Hi, Stuart. Lovely to see you, of course. Hi, Carol.
you feature mostly the Monhegan skiff. And I'm wondering, over the years, how many do you think you have made totally, starting with your time in Monhegan to recent? Maybe about
Yeah. Well, of course, the Manhegan skiff, you know, the stories are, again, one well known that when we started the boat shop, the last skiff builder, boat builder on Manhegan contacted me because he had gone blind, Ronnie Stanley, and he asked if I would continue building the skiffs for the fishermen. And I was honored and thrilled to be able to do that. And I think, Stuart, of course, the Manhegan skiff has become the kind of basic boat that all apprentices have to build, and it's the entry level boat. And to build a skiff, it kind of lends itself so perfectly into moving into dories and peapods and dinghies. But it's just a perfect boat to kind of start with. So I think probably over the years, 45 years, we've built at least, I don't know, 200, 250 different skiffs from time to time.
Bob,
Hi, Bobby.
may Diane and Paul say something?
Oh, Diane and Paul, lovely to see you.
We go way back.
This is so moving, Bob. But one of your Monhegan skiffs, built by a friend of our son's, still lives with us in Minnesota at our little lake. But I must say, we were co-students of Bobby and Ruth at New College, University of Edinburgh. And that's what we learned, what amazing people they were. And we remember Ruth profoundly. And Bobby, you're always in our hearts. And
For 6 months there that we spent where I was theologian in residence and Paul built the table. It's still so much part of our lives that we can hardly stand it.
so
Oh, well,
thank
I
you for
think of you every time, Paul and Diane, I think of you every time I sit down at that table. It's just such a beautiful job.
I mean, it's
Paul
still
built our dining
standing.
room table. It's still standing. It's well used and well worn. So
We have one question that says, how do I apply to become an apprentice? Which we've just launched a new website, which makes it easier. There's an online form. And if you fill out the online form to become an apprentice, then we reach out to you and we start the process. It's relatively simple. The key component is that you need to be 18 years old or older. So 18 to what I like to say 99, although we consider a 100-year-old.
we did have an apprentice who was 81 years old. Actually, he was 85 years old at the time. Again, his son is with us right now, but it would be Stuart Gillespie, who lived to be almost 104. But Stuart was an apprentice one year and built a 19-foot rowing shell.
But if you're interested in being an apprentice, please reach out. We'd be very happy to hear from you. Any age.
Hey, Bobby, it's Ben here.
Hi, Ben. Where I can't see you, but that's all right.
Well,
oh, Ben!
I'm
My gosh, there you are.
yeah, hey,
That's
calling
my
in
roommate.
from
That's my roommate at Bowdoin College, Dr. Benjamin.
right.
Oh my gosh.
So, I'm calling from India. Suquan and I got here a couple of days ago. Bobby, that was the most inspiring talk. I'm going to get choked up just talking about your talk just now. It was so beautiful and inspiring. I may have missed this because it was a little glitch here, but when you and Ruth were on Monhegan, and what was the if you can tell the evolution of the idea of making your ministry the boat shop? I thought, given how much you like to talk, that you would be a great minister in a church, and that you would, but something really changed in that you together you decided this would be your ministry, to make a boat shop that would, and then your closing about the three things that you said at the end was so beautiful. But can you just briefly trace that evolution, how that happened, or that you went from having a parish and a church and to opening a boat shop?
Well, to be honest, I was never really a parish minister. I am not a person who really subscribes to doctrines and to other types of kind of
Yeah,
religious traditions in that way. I'm a person who
yeah,
believes
yeah,
in loving and being kind and being thoughtful, building peace and building community around peace and justice and love. So that was the ministry I simply wanted to not preach, but do and share it with
yeah,
others that kind of way. So it was a doing kind of ministry
yeah.
rather than a doctrinal kind of ministry.
Yeah, thank you. That's I know that that's the truth, and I was one of the first people to stay in that new dormitory. That was it was it was cold. It was
We didn't get the heat in. We didn't. The apprentices moved in, but the heat didn't come with it.
that was the winter I was there. That's great to see you, and please say hi and give Phyllis a big hug from us.
And best love to Suqua as well.
Bobby, Carol O'Donnell here
Oh, hi, Carol.
from Brunswick.
There we are.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the chapel and how the chapel is used and how you incorporate this lovely sort of sense of what you hoped to instill in the apprentices about life and life journey and giving, peace and love and giving back to community, how that's incorporated in the experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, Carol, again, we always had chapel,
Well,
really for
hold on.
all the time
Part
that
of
I was there. And for, oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, so we always had chapel. We built it, but we always had chapel, usually on Wednesdays. And again, I come out of a Quaker tradition. My mom was a Quaker, and a congregational UCC tradition as well. But although I'm outwardly and visibly a UCC minister, inwardly and spiritually, I'm a Quaker. And in that sense, we always did have chapel, but chapel was kind of like a Quaker meeting. We always would begin with silence, a period of silence for about 10, 15 minutes or so. Yes. Then we always had singing, and we always would sing the songs that meant something, that were important to individuals. They didn't have to be religious songs. It was just whatever people loved to sing and brought inspiration and meaning and comfort to them. We developed a little kind of a song book that we would sing on a regular basis. I think probably there was about 150 to 200 different songs, and we still have that little kind of song book. And then after the silence and the singing, we then would simply have discussions about whatever topics people would like, whatever the apprentices wanted to talk about. It would be anything from what makes life sacred and meaningful to what is the political right decision to make about different situations at hand. It was about sex and sexuality, anything that people needed to talk about, wanted to talk about, and were willing to talk about. We would have the apprentices leave that discussion so that it was something that got into serious aspects of life. And how can we then become loving and helping and people of peace in dealing with those types of topics? So again, Carol, that's how the actual services were run. And it was just I think for many, I think it was probably one of the more meaningful times at the life in the boat shop that way. But it wasn't a formal religious service. It was a topic which meant something to everyone.
Nice. Thank you.
Do we have more folks?
Oh, look at Ben. I'd
Or
like you to
Bobby?
all look at Ben here. Ben is a performance psychologist, and he always teaches everyone how to talk. It was Ben Bernstein who taught me how to talk. At Bowdoin College, we always had to have speech class. And at the beginning of speech class, you had to give a 2-minute speech. And when they asked me to give my 2-minute speech about any topic I wanted, I couldn't do it. I was so nervous and so upset I couldn't do it. But it's this wonderful man here who taught me how to talk and to have a sense of confidence about speaking, and not just a sense of confidence, but a love of speaking as well. So Ben, thank you for everything.
And you never looked back, Bob. You just kept going. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Well, thank you
It
all
was such,
so much.
it
Thank
was
you for
such,
coming.
it was such an inspiring talk, Bobby. It, 45 years and all those boats and all those buildings. I loved how the buildings, every time a new building slide went up, you went, boom, here's the building. As if like just, it just magically appeared. And that all the hard work and it's just amazing. It's just so amazing. It's such a
Well,
totally blessing to know you.
it's all because of the apprentices. They built almost every single building there. It might not be the finest carpentry, but they've done an outstanding job. And whenever I see the different buildings, I always remember the different folks who were involved in the building of them. So it's been a great honor.
And the pass fail exam is priceless, just priceless. It either sails or it sinks.
Great. Well, again, thank you all so much for coming. Lovely to see your wonderful faces. And thank you also for your support of the boat shop. Again, it's been a wonderful opportunity to
Hey,
give
I've got one question really quick.
Good. Oh, Matthew, is that you?
Yes. Can I ask you a question?
Sure, Matthew.
Okay. Now, this won't make sense for the moment, but what is the longest period of time you've gone without sleep? In other words, I've gone, 2 days without sleep, something like that. And the secondary question is, have you ever been, like scared to death, like on a boat crash? And I'm gonna let you go. That's my 2 questions. That's all I got.
For those who are apprentices, they know that never 24 hours goes around that I don't sleep, because after I've had my noonday meal, I always retire for my nap. And I've been napping ever since I was in high school. So it's very rare. And if I do, and if I don't get that nap in, you better be very, very careful if you're with me. And in fact, breezing up, let me see here. The Cape Cod, the Booth Bay Harbor 1, we were out sailing once on an expedition. I'd had my lunch. We were all cruising in Muscongas Bay. I'd given the course, but a course of what we were to sail. But again, since it was after lunch, suddenly I dozed off. And the next thing I knew is we had drifted a little too close to Coombs Ledge. So we hit that ledge with the Booth Bay Harbor 1. And that did wake me up very, very quickly. And again, Matthew, I was very, a little frightened about what was happening. But again, we got our composure and eventually we were able to get it off the island. It was, again, an ebbing tide, so we had to move very quickly. But we eventually got Cape Cod.
Yeah, no, it's part of that high society, situation. I understand.
Okay.
But anyways, I'm on Bluetooth, but anyways, however you're coordinating this is the best lecture, period. So I'll let you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's it. No, it's the best. Don't question that. I'm good. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I know what I'm talking about. Anyways, you guys are so nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Well, again, it's a
Yeah.
joy to see you all out there. Thank you so much. Come.
Oh
visit
no,
us.
and it's so fun to work for you guys. No, and it's so fun to work for you guys, and just it's logistics, the weather.
I'd like to say about Matthew. Matthew is a dear helper at the Carpenter's Boat Shop, and he helps us do so many different things. So we're very, very grateful to Matthew.
I know, and when my ship comes in, we're gonna give you more, advantage, if you will. But anyways, it's so interesting because you talk about the barn chapel, and that means a lot to me. I mean, it means a lot to you. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Anyways, you're doing it. Let me go.
Thanks, Matthew.
Shut me down. I can't give you more compliment. I can't give you more compliments and gestures. Cut me off.
Are there any other folks out there that have questions for Bobby this evening?
I don't have any questions. My name is Karen and my son Sammy is a current apprentice at your shop.
Oh, wow.
I want to thank you for everything you do, everything. It's been amazing. We all came up to see Sammy this summer and visited the shop, and we were all very, very impressed. Thanks again.
Well, we love Sammy. What a wonderful person.
Love Sammy.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Any others out there that want to ask Bobby a great question about the history of the boat shop?
Leash, can you hear us?
Yep.
Yeah, I just I hadn't I was unmuted there, so I just want to thank you for the invite, and also thank you, Bobby, for sharing. That was remarkable. We because we've heard a lot of it from Leash, but we enjoyed your presentation very, very much. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And inside intel, those are my parents, so therefore my biggest fans.
Thank you for that.
Bobby, thank you for a lovely evening. This was so wonderful. I'm so glad that we're able to capture this, and thank you for saying yes, and thank you all for being here and being a part of this wonderfulness. We celebrated 45 years, and we have many, many, many years ahead of us. And it's all in part because of Bobby and Ruth and all the other fabulous humans that support this organization. So,
right.
And thank you too.
Well, thank you so much for blessings on you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.